Greetings from Prince of Peace. The message I have for you this week is a little bit different, and I'd like to thank the Gizas for giving me the inspiration to do today's message. You see, the Gizas, Brett, Amy, and their two children, Dominic and Juliana, had a wonderful event going on in their neighborhood during this self-quarantine. And what they had going on was a Chalk Your Walk event. And so each family were to go out with sidewalk chalk and draw pictures or quotes or inspiring messages. And what the Gizas did was they did something pretty remarkable. They drew a large stained glass looking cross, absolutely beautiful, on one of the main footpaths. They also attached some inspiring quotes and inspiring messages as well. In fact, they wrote the scripture quote from Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, where it says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." So they shared this with me as a kind of inspiration of what people are doing in their neighborhoods and so forth. But it made me think, have we ever really taken the time to appreciate the stained glass windows here at Prince of Peace? As you know, we have 17 stained glass windows, and so I would like to share them with you right now. We have 17 stained glass windows in total. The 4 windows located behind the choir are of all women saints. Saint Anne of David's house and line was the mother of Mary and the grandmother of Jesus. Although no canonical books of the New Testament never mention the mother of the Virgin Mary, traditions about her family, childhood, education, and even marriage to Joseph developed very early in the history of the Church. She is often portrayed wearing red and green, which represent love and life. Saint Cecilia is the patroness of musicians. Cecilia is frequently depicted playing a small organ or other musical instrument, evidently to express that was often attributed to her, namely that while the musicians played at her nuptials, she sang in her heart to the Lord. She's one of 7 women, including the Blessed Virgin Mary, commemorated by name in the canon of the Mass. Saint Bridget or Brigid of Kildare, or Bridget of Ireland. She's one of the Ireland's patron saints, along with Patrick and Columba. Columba we also have a stained glass window of. Irish biographies make her an early Irish Christian nun, abbess and foundress of several monasteries for nuns, including that of Kildare in Ireland, which was famous and was revered. St. Bridget's likeness is often depicted holding a reed cross, a crozier, or a lamp. St. Agnes is a virgin martyr. She's one of the 7 women who, along with the Blessed Virgin Mary, are commemorated by name in the canon of the Mass. She is the patron saint of chastity, gardeners, girls, engaged couples, virgins, and the children of Mary. She's often depicted in art with a lamb, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, evoking her name, which resembles the Latin word for lamb, agnus. On the west wall, or the tabernacle side, we have 6 stained glass windows. St. Peter, also known as Simon Peter, was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ, leaders of the early Christian great church. Title of Apostle of the Apostles. And according to Catholic teaching, Peter was ordained by Jesus in the Rock of My Church dialogue in Matthew chapter 16. He is traditionally counted as the first bishop of Rome or the first pope. Peter is usually depicted with a bushy white beard and white hair, depicting Peter also holding the keys to heaven. Saint James. Saint James, son of Zebedee, was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, traditionally considered the first apostle to be martyred. He was the brother of John the Apostle, and the Synoptic Gospels say that James and John were with their father by the seashore when Jesus called them to follow him. He is also called James the Greater, or James the Great, to distinguish him from James, son of Alphaeus. The name Greater to distinguish him from the Apostle James the Less, with greater meaning older or taller, rather than more important. St. Andrew, tradition the first called, was a Christian apostle and the brother of St. Peter. Both he and his brother Peter were fishermen by trade, hence the tradition that Jesus called them to be his disciples by saying that they will make them fishers of men. St. Philip was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. Later Christian traditions describe Philip as the apostle who preached in Greece and Syria. He's depicted as elderly, bearded saint and open to God man, holding a basket of loaves and a tau cross. In our window you can see the tau cross. It is a T-shaped cross, sometimes with all three ends of the cross extended. It is called a tau cross because it is shaped like the Greek letter tau, which in its uppercase form has the same appearance as Latin and English letter T. St. Matthew, the apostle, also known as Levi, was according to the Christian Bible one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, and according to Christian tradition, one of the 4 evangelists. After his call, Matthew invited Jesus home for a feast, and on seeing this, the scribes and the Pharisees criticized Jesus for eating with tax collectors and sinners. This prompted Jesus to answer, "I came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." St. John the Evangelist is a name traditionally given to the author of the Gospel of John. He is considered and listed generally as the youngest apostle. He was son of Zebedee and Salome. His brother was James, who was another of the 12 apostles. Christians have traditionally identified him with John the Apostle. On the back southwest wall, we have 6 stained glass windows. Saint Simon the Zealot, Simon, who was called the Zealot, was one of the most obscure among all the apostles of Jesus. Saint Thaddeus, also known as Judas Thaddeus, was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. He is generally identified with Thaddeus and is also variously called Jude of James, Jude Thaddeus. He is clearly distinguished from Judas Iscariot, the apostle who would betray Jesus prior to his crucifixion. Sacred Heart. The devotion to the Sacred Heart, also known as the Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, is one of the most widely practiced and well-known Roman Catholic devotions, taking Jesus Christ's physical heart as a representation of his divine love for humanity. The devotion is especially concerned with what the Church deems to be the long-suffering love and compassion of the heart of Christ towards humanity. The Sacred Heart is often depicted in Christian art as a flaming heart shining with divine light, pierced by the lance wound, encircled by the crown of thorns, surmounted by a cross, and bleeding. Sometimes the image is shown shining within the bosom of Christ and with his wounded hands pointing at the heart. The wounds and crown of thorns allude to the manner of Jesus' death, while the fire represents the transformative power of divine love. Pope St. Pius V was pope from January 1566 to his death in 1572. He is chiefly notable for his role in the Council of Trent, the Counter-Reformation, and the standardization of the Roman Rite within the Latin Church. Pius V declared Thomas Aquinas a doctor of the Catholic Church. St. Lawrence was one of the 7 deacons of the city of Rome, Italy, under Pope Saint Sixtus II, who were martyred in the persecution of the Christians that the Roman Emperor Valerian ordered in 258. The prefect was so angry that he had a great gridiron prepared with hot coals beneath it and had Lawrence placed on it, hence Lawrence's association with the gridiron. After the martyr had suffered pain for a long time, the legend concludes that he cheerfully declared, "I'm well done on this side, turn me over." From this, St. Lawrence derives his patronage of cooks, chefs, and comedians. St. Columba was an Irish abbot and missionary credited with spreading Christianity in what is today Scotland at the start of the Hiberno-Scottish mission. He founded the important abbey on Iona, which became a dominant religious and political institution in the region for centuries. He is remembered today as a Christian saint and one of the 12 apostles of Ireland. He's often attributed in monk's robe, Celtic tonsure, and a crozier. Our 17th stained glass window is located in the Reconciliation Room. Saint Aloysius de Gonzaga was an Italian aristocrat who became a member of the Society of Jesus, or Jesuits. While still a student at the Roman College, he died as a result of caring for the victims of a serious epidemic. He was beatified in 1605, canonized in 1726. In art, Aloysius is shown as a young man wearing a black cassock and surplice. His attributes are a lily, referring to innocence, a cross, referring to piety and sacrifice, and if he's depicted with a skull, it's referring to his early death, a rosary, referring to his devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. I hope you enjoyed our stained glass windows, but if you understand the history of stained glass windows, now we know the purpose of regular windows is to allow light to come into the building, to allow light from the outside, to maybe illuminate a room. But the purpose of stained glass windows is actually different. It's not to allow people to see outside, but rather it's to beautify the buildings. Stained glass windows control light. Stained glass windows often tell a story. And so originally, stained glass windows were meant to teach the Catholic faith to people who were illiterate, especially peasants at the time when most people were not able to read. And so they would go to a church and they would look at the pictures depicted in church windows, in stained glass windows. Now, those pictures would show a story, maybe a Bible story, or maybe it would show something from church history, or maybe it would show one of the 7 sacraments. And so with that, people who were illiterate were able to learn their Catholic faith through stained glass windows. In fact, I'd like to share with you a little piece of trivia. If you've ever seen a building and someone described the building by its height, by how many stories it is, that reverts back to Catholic churches. Because in the olden days, churches were the largest buildings in a town. And so if you hear someone say, "How tall is that building?" and someone says, "Well, that building is 7 stories tall," rather than saying 7 floors, they're getting that from the history of the Catholic Church and stained glass windows. Because people used to determine how large a church was how many stories of stained glass windows they've had. And so it's just a little piece of trivia in terms of how stained glass windows have come from so far. I would like to end with this, and it has to do with those stained glass windows, obviously, that we've been experiencing today in this message. That stained glass windows flood the interior of a church with mystic light. Now, if you're standing on the outside looking at those same stained glass windows, they can be very dark, very heavy, very dreary. But once you enter the church, those those windows suddenly become alive. They reflect the light passing through them. They reveal those stories, those sacraments, that church history in all its splendor. Now, many writers have used that image of stained glass windows to illustrate something pretty profound. They use it to illustrate the mystery of the church itself. I mean it by this. It's only from the inside, from the experience of our faith and ecclesial life, that we could see the church as she truly is. Flooded by grace, resplendent in beauty, adored by the manifold gifts of the Spirit. So it follows that we, who live the life of grace within the church's communion, are called to draw people into that mystery of light. It's no easy task in a world today. Hopefully the example of the Gizas being able to do that, were able to inspire their neighbors, to have people tend to look at that mystery of faith that we so much love in our Catholic faith, that we're able to see that disposition of stained glass windows all around us, that as people look from the outside, we're able to experience the grace and beauty on the inside. There's a world out there that desperately needs that sense of spirituality. It finds it difficult to enter into the mystery of the church. Doing that simple thing of the sidewalk chalk in terms of quoting Philippians 4:13 by drawing a stained glass window. Those are the inspirations that we can bring to people outside Prince of Peace, to our own domestic churches, to our own neighborhoods. In a word, it's not always to see the light of the Spirit that is all about us, the splendor of the risen Lord illuminating our lives, instilling renewed hope in this victory in terms of over the world, but hopefully use that as an inspiration, that we can use the examples of those saints that we just saw in our own stained glass windows to see how the beauty pours forth into Prince of Peace when the light is shining. That as we leave here, we also be that mystery, that love of Christ that we bring to the people we encounter. May God bless you and keep you safe today and always. Saint Stan. You might be wondering why I am ending with Saint Stan. You see, Saint Stan is one of the funniest things that ever happened to me here at Prince of Peace. I was given a church tour to our religious education students in first grade. And as we came around the choir, we came to the stained glass window of St. Anne. And so as we approached the window, I pointed to St. Anne and I asked, does anyone know who this is? Now you have to realize that the first grader's answer for everything is always Mary. I said, no, this is not Mary. But as you look around her head, we see a halo. And if you look at all the other windows in the church and all the other saints, every saint has a halo around their head. Now, if we look at this stained glass window, we see this little girl. She too has a halo around her head. Do we know who this is? Of course, they said Mary, because Mary was the answer they had for everything. And I said, yes, if this is Mary, then who's this? And the response was, that is Mary's mother. And I said, yes, exactly. So if this is Mary's mother, this is also Jesus' grandmother. But now that we know this is Mary, and this is Mary's mother, does anyone know Mary's mother's name? I proceeded to point to the name at the bottom of the stained glass window, and one of the students yelled out, Stan. So as you see, we do have a Saint Stan.